in the shadowed heart of Victorian London, a name was born that still sends a shiver down the spine, a name that has become synonymous with terror, mystery, and the darkest corners of the human soul. Jack the Ripper, a phantom cloaked in fog, a killer who struck with surgical precision, leaving behind a trail of blood and dread that has haunted the world for over a century. His crimes were gruesome, his methods chilling, his audacity unmatched. He didn't just kill. He performed, taunting a city, a police force, and an empire with his brutality. And his identity? It remains one of the greatest unsolved enigmas in the history of true crime, a puzzle that has consumed investigators, historians, and armchair detectives for generations. But what if the truth about Jack the Ripper isn't just lost to the mists of time? What if it's been deliberately hidden, buried deep in the shadows to protect someone so powerful, so untouchable, that their guilt could have torn apart the very fabric of Victorian society? What if the Ripper's true face is a secret guarded not by history, but by those who shaped it, those who decided what the world could know, and what it could not? Tonight, we're plunging into the dark, twisting alleys of Whitechapel, peeling back the layers of the most infamous murder case ever recorded. We'll walk through the crimes that turned a city into a cauldron of fear, unravel the suspects whose names still whisper through time like ghosts, and confront the question that keeps us awake at night. Is the identity of Jack the Ripper still being concealed to shield someone, or something, far bigger than we can ever imagine? This is a story that will grip you, twist your mind, and hold you captive until the very last second. It's a tale of blood, betrayal, and secrets that refuse to die. So stay with us, because the mystery of Jack the Ripper is about to unfold, and you won't want to miss a single moment of this chilling journey into the heart of darkness. Close your eyes and step into the world of 1888 London, a city poised on the edge of modernity, yet shrouded in a darkness that clings to its soul. By day, it's the glittering capital of the British Empire, a sprawling metropolis where grand carriages clatter down wide, cobblestone avenues lined with ornate shop fronts and towering buildings. Gentlemen in top hats and frock coats stroll past bustling markets, where merchants hawk everything from fresh bread to exotic spices, their voices mingling with the clop of horse hooves and the distant whistle of steamships on the Thames. The river itself glitters under the sun, carrying the wealth of an empire to distant shores, a symbol of Britain's unyielding power. But as night falls, a different London emerges, one cloaked in shadows, where the veneer of civilization peels away to reveal a grim, unforgiving underbelly. In the East End, in the grimy, overcrowded district of Whitechapel, the streets are a labyrinth of narrow, twisting alleys, lined with crumbling tenements, smoky pubs, and squalid boarding houses. The air is thick with the acrid stench of coal smoke, rotting refuse, and the faint, metallic tang of despair. Gas lamps cast an eerie, flickering glow, the feeble light barely piercing the suffocating fog that clings to everything like a sinister veil, muffling sounds and hiding dangers in its murky embrace. Footsteps echo on wet cobblestones, but you can't tell if they belong to a friend, a stranger, or something far worse. A distant scream pierces the night, perhaps a drunkard's cry, perhaps a street brawl, or perhaps something far more sinister. This is a place where poverty grinds hope to dust, where desperation is a way of life, and where every shadow seems to pulse with menace. Every corner holds a promise of danger. Women huddle in doorways, their faces gaunt with hunger, their eyes wary of every passerby. Men stagger from pubs, their laughter tinged with unease, their hands clutching knives or sticks for protection. This is Whitechapel, a forgotten corner of London where survival is a daily battle and trust is a luxury few can afford. It's here, in the autumn of 1888, that a killer began his reign of terror, a killer who had come to be known as Jack the Ripper. His crimes were so horrifying, so meticulously cruel, that they shocked even a city hardened by violence. They weren't just murders, they were a performance, taunt, a puzzle crafted by a mind that seemed to delight in defying comprehension, mocking those who dared to pursue him. Each killing was a brushstroke in a macabre masterpiece, painted in blood and fear, designed to terrify not just Whitechapel, but the world. How could one man create such fear, turning an entire city into a prison of paranoia? Why did he choose Whitechapel, this forsaken slum, as the stage for his horrors? And why, after all these years, does his identity remain shrouded in mystery, as elusive as the fog that cloaked his crimes, a secret that seems to slip through our fingers no matter how close we get? The story of Jack the Ripper is written in the blood of 5 women, known today as the canonical 5, women society overlooked, dismissed, and discarded, living on the margins in a brutal world, yet whose deaths would etch their names into the annals of history, forever linked to a monster. These were not just victims, they were daughters, mothers, sisters, each with a story cut short by a blade wielded with unthinkable cruelty. Their lives were hard, their deaths harder, and their legacy is a haunting reminder of a killer who seemed to thrive on the vulnerability of his prey. First was Mary Ann Nichols, a 43-year-old mother of 5 who had fallen on hard times after her marriage crumbled, leaving her to scrape by on the streets of Whitechapel. On August 31st, 1888, her body was found in the early hours on Bucks Row, a dark, secluded street where the gaslight barely reached. Her throat was slashed with chilling precision, 2 deep cuts that nearly severed her head from her body, executed with the steadiness that suggested practice or intent. Her abdomen bore wounds so savage, so deliberate, that they hinted at a killer with a terrifying purpose, an almost ritualistic brutality that went beyond mere murder. The police were stunned, their lanterns casting trembling light on a scene that felt more like a nightmare than reality. This wasn't just a crime. It was a statement, a declaration of something far darker, something that felt almost inhuman in its cold calculation. Just over a week later, on September 8th, Annie Chapman, a 47-year-old widow, was found in a backyard on Hanbury Street, just as dawn broke over the city's smoky skyline, painting the rooftops in hues of gray and gold. Her injuries were even more meticulous, her body mutilated with an almost surgical skill that hinted at a killer who knew anatomy, or wanted it to seem that way. Her throat was cut with a single, clean stroke, so deep it nearly decapitated her. Her abdomen was opened with precision, certain organs removed and placed with care, as if the killer were staging a grotesque tableau. The scene was so methodical, so cold, that it felt like the work of a predator taunting his pursuers, daring them to understand his motives. Was this a doctor, a butcher, or something else entirely? A creature born of nightmares who wore a human face? The city barely had time to process this horror when, on September 30th, the Ripper struck twice in one night, an audacious escalation that sent shockwaves through London and beyond. Elizabeth Stride, a 44-year-old Swedish immigrant who had drifted through a life of hardship, was found in Dutfield's yard, her throat cut with a single, swift slash, but her body otherwise untouched, as if the killer had been interrupted mid-act, perhaps by the creak of a gate, the crunch of footsteps, or the sudden glow of a lantern in the fog. Less than an hour later, Catherine Eddowes, a 46-year-old drifter known for her quick wit and fiery spirit, was discovered in Mitre Square, a small, dimly lit plaza hemmed in by warehouses and shadows. Her body was so brutally mutilated, her face disfigured, her organs removed with surgical precision, her body posed in a way that screamed defiance, that even veteran officers were left shaken, some reportedly unable to speak of what they saw for days, their faces pale, their hands trembling as they recounted the scene. The savagery was breathtaking, a deliberate act of horror that seemed to mock the police's every effort, a challenge to their authority scrawled in blood. The final victim, Mary Jane Kelly, was found on November 9th in her tiny, squalid room on Dorset Street, a place so small it felt more like a coffin than a home. At just 25, she was the youngest of the five, a vibrant woman with dreams of a better life, her laughter a fleeting light in Whitechapel's gloom. Her murder was the most horrifying, a crescendo of cruelty that defied comprehension. The scene was so gruesome, so nightmarish, that the coroner could barely describe it, his voice faltering as he addressed the inundus wheel, and those who entered the room carried the images to their graves. Her body was virtually unrecognizable, the walls, the floor, the bed stained with the evidence of a killer's rage, or perhaps his twisted artistry. The brutality was beyond imagination, as if the killer had unleashed every ounce of his darkness in a single frenzied act. These women, each struggling to survive in a merciless world, became the targets of a monster who seemed to know no limits. But who was he? What drove him to such unthinkable acts? Why did he choose these women, whose lives were already so fragile, as the canvas for his horrors? Was it random, or was there a purpose buried in his madness? And how could he vanish so completely, leaving nothing but fear and questions in his wake, a specter who seemed to dissolve into the very fog that hid his crimes? As the body count rose, Whitechapel descended into a state of pure, unrelenting panic, a city held hostage by its own shadows, where fear became as tangible as the fog itself. The terror was palpable, seeping into every corner of London's East End, turning daily life into a waking nightmare. Women refused to walk alone after dark, clutching makeshift weapons, kitchen knives, broken bottles, sharpened sticks, or barricading themselves in cramped rooms that offered little safety, their ears straining for the sound of footsteps outside. Men formed vigilante groups, patrolling the alleys with clubs, pipes, and makeshift spears, their eyes scanning the fog for any sign of the Ripper, their hearts pounding with a mix of anger and dread. Whispers filled the pubs, the markets, the tenements, weaving a tapestry of fear and suspicion. "He's a ghost," they said. "He's the devil himself, come to punish us for our sins." Some swore they'd seen him, a tall man in a black cape, a short man with a mustache, a figure clutching a sinister black bag, but no two descriptions matched, each sighting dissolving into the haze of rumor and panic. The police, meanwhile, were drowning in the chaos, their every move scrutinized, their every failure magnified by a city desperate for answers. Scotland Yard was understaffed, underfunded, and woefully unprepared for a killer this cunning, this elusive. Their methods were crude, rooted in a time before modern forensics, relying on little more than intuition and persistence. They canvassed the streets, knocking on doors, dragging men from their beds on the flimsiest of suspicions. Eyewitness accounts were their best hope, but these were often vague, contradictory, or clouded by fear, darkness, or the haze of gin-soaked nights. A woman claimed she saw a man with a shiny knife near Hanbury Street. A laborer swore he heard a scream near Mitre Square. A child described a shadowy figure in a top hat. But the stories crumbled under scrutiny, leaving the police grasping at straws. Crime scenes were chaotic, trampled by curious onlookers, journalists, or even the police themselves, who contaminated evidence in their rush to act. Bloodstains washed away, bodies moved, clues lost to the fog of incompetence or desperation. Bloodhounds were brought in but proved useless, wandering aimlessly in the labyrinthine alleys. Lanterns cast more shadows than light, and the fog seemed to mock their efforts, swallowing every hope of clarity. The press turned tragedy into a grotesque spectacle, fanning the flames of hysteria. Newspapers like the Star, the Illustrated Police News, and the Pall Mall Gazette churned out sensational headlines, each more lurid than the last. Another Whitechapel horror. The fiend strikes again. Is Jack the Ripper a madman, a mastermind, or a monster? They printed wild theories that captured the public's imagination. A deranged surgeon with a grudge against the poor, a vengeful butcher honing his trade on human flesh, an aristocratic thrill-seeker slumming it in the East End for the thrill of the kill, a mad scientist experimenting with human lives. Some even whispered that the killer wasn't British at all, but a foreigner, an Eastern European, a Russian, a Jew, bringing some dark, alien evil to London's shores, tapping into the city's deep-seated xenophobia. These stories fueled anti-immigrant sentiment, turning neighbors into suspects, tearing at the fragile social fabric of Whitechapel. The public devoured every word, clipping articles, debating theories in pubs and parlors, and feeding a media frenzy that turned the Ripper into a legend almost overnight, a figure larger than life, both demon and myth. Letters poured into police stations and newsrooms by the hundreds, some claiming to be from the killer himself, taunting, mocking, dripping with malice. The Dear Boss letter, dated September 25, 1888, promised more bloodshed, boasting of the killer's skill and signing off with the name that would echo through history, Jack the Ripper. Another, the infamous From Hell letter, arrived on October 16th, with a piece of a human kidney, its gruesome contents chilling proof of the killer's audacity, leaving detectives shaken and the public horrified. Were these letters genuine, the voice of a monster, or the work of pranksters exploiting the chaos? No one could say for sure, but they deepened the terror, making the Ripper seem omnipresent, untouchable, a specter who could strike at will, his laughter hidden in the fog. Behind the headlines, the police were chasing shadows, their efforts a desperate scramble against an invisible foe. They interviewed hundreds, arrested dozens, searched slaughterhouses, interrogated doctors, sailors, immigrants, anyone who seemed out of place. They staked out alleys, patrolled the docks, followed every tip, no matter how absurd. But every lead fizzled out. Every suspect slipped through their fingers, their alibis holding just enough truth to keep them free. The pressure was crushing. Queen Victoria herself demanded action, decrying the police's failures in a rare public statement. The Home Office breathed down their necks, the press hounded their every step, and the public bayed for blood, their trust in authority eroding with each new murder. Was the Ripper just too clever, blending seamlessly into the chaos of Whitechapel's teeming streets? A chameleon in human form? Or was something, or someone, keeping the truth just out of reach, steering the investigation away from a revelation too dangerous to uncover? Could the police have been deliberately misled, their efforts sabotaged by forces higher than they could challenge? Politicians, aristocrats, perhaps even the monarchy itself? The silence that followed the murders, as abrupt as their onset, only deepened the mystery, leaving London to wonder if the killer had died, fled, or simply chosen to vanish, his work complete. The question of who Jack the Ripper was has spawned a labyrinth of theories, each more tantalizing, more maddening, more elusive than the last, a kaleidoscope of possibilities that both illuminate and obscure the truth. Over the years, dozens of names have been floated, from the obscure to the infamous, each with a story that pulls you in, twists your perspective, and leaves you questioning everything you thought you knew. The suspects are a gallery of contradictions, ordinary men with extraordinary secrets, prominent figures with hidden darkness, each a piece of a puzzle that refuses to come together. Let's start with Montague John Druitt, a 31-year-old barrister from a respectable family, a man who seemed to have it all: education, charm, a promising career in law. But beneath the polished exterior, Druitt was plagued by mental instability, a shadow possibly inherited from his mother, who spent her final years in an asylum, her mind lost to madness. Druitt was a gentleman, yet he frequented the East End, drawn to its gritty allure for reasons no one could fully explain. In December 1888, just weeks after the murders stopped, he drowned himself in the Thames, his body found floating in the icy waters, a note in his pocket hinting at despair. Melville Macnaghten, a senior policeman who joined Scotland Yard shortly after the killings, named Druitt as a prime suspect in a private memorandum, suggesting his suicide was a confession of guilt, a tormented soul unable to bear the weight of his sins. But was it guilt that drove him into the river's cold embrace, or just the unraveling of a troubled mind, broken by pressures unrelated to murder? The evidence is thin, circumstantial at best, based on little more than timing, hearsay, and the suspicions of a detective who never met him. Yet the coincidence is haunting, and Druitt's story lingers like an unanswered question, a tragic figure who might have carried a monstrous secret to his grave. Then there's Aaron Kosminski, a Polish-Jewish barber living in the heart of Whitechapel, a man whose life was a spiral of poverty, alienation, and rage. Kosminski was known for his violent outbursts and erratic behavior, muttering to himself as he wandered the streets, his mind fracturing under the weight of paranoia and delusion. By 1891, he was committed to an asylum, where he spent years confined to his delusions, a shadow of a man who once haunted Whitechapel. Police records from the time, including notes by Chief Inspector Donald Swanson, named Kosminski as a prime suspect, hinting he was identified by a witness, a Jewish man who saw him with one of the victims but refused to testify, perhaps out of fear, loyalty, or some unspoken code. In 2014, the Kosminski theory exploded into the spotlight when DNA tests on a shawl allegedly found at Catherine et al.'s crime scene pointed to him, suggesting traces of his genetic material mingled with the victim's blood. The headlines screamed "Case closed," and the world leaned in, desperate for resolution after a century of mystery. But the truth is far murkier, a tangle of science and speculation. The shawl's chain of custody is a mess. It was passed through countless hands, from policemen to collectors to auction houses, stored in attics, displayed in museums, exposed to contamination over decades. DNA testing from 19th century artifacts is notoriously unreliable, prone to degradation, cross-contamination, or misinterpretation. Experts remain divided, with some dismissing the findings as wishful thinking, a case of science bending to the allure of a headline, while others cling to the hope that Kosminski's DNA is the key to unlocking the mystery. Could he be the answer, a local man whose fractured mind turned him into a monster, his crimes the product of madness rather than malice? Or was he just a convenient scapegoat, his name plucked from the margins to quiet a city's fears? Next, we have a theory that sounds like it's ripped from the pages of a Gothic conspiracy novel. Prince Albert Victor, the Duke of Clarence, grandson of Queen Victoria herself. Some claim he was the Ripper, royal blue blood, whose crimes were covered up to protect the monarchy from a scandal that could have shattered the British Empire. The idea is gripping, almost cinematic. Imagine the chaos, the headlines, the sheer audacity if a prince were exposed as a serial killer, stalking the slums for sport or driven by some hidden madness. Proponents point to Albert Victor's rumored double life, his alleged fascination with the East End's underbelly, and whispers of royal cover-ups orchestrated to preserve the crown's honor. Stories circulated of his involvement in scandalous affairs, his health plagued by illness. Some even claimed syphilis had driven him to insanity. But the evidence is flimsy, a patchwork of gossip, speculation, and coincidence. The prince's documented absences from London during some of the murders cast serious doubt on his involvement, and the idea of a royal killer seems more like fiction than fact. Yet it's hard to dismiss entirely. Could the monarchy have buried the truth, using its immense power to erase a prince's crimes? Is it too wild to be true, or just wild enough to hold a sliver of possibility? A dark secret guarded by the crown to this day? Another suspect is Walter Sickert, a renowned artist whose moody, unsettling paintings captured the grim underbelly of Victorian life, from smoky music halls to desolate streets that echoed Whitechapel's gloom. Crime writer Patricia Cornwell became obsessed with Sickert, spending millions investigating him, convinced his obsession with the murders, his time in London, and his dark artistic vision made him the perfect fit. She pointed to eerie parallels between his paintings and the crime scenes, compositions that seemed to mirror the victim's wounds, colors that evoke blood and shadow, themes of violence and despair. Cornwell even claimed his letters mimicked the Ripper's taunts, and that his personal life, rife with secrets, affairs, and a fascination with the macabre, pointed to a man capable of unspeakable acts. She analyzed his artwork, his movements, even his DNA, searching for proof that his brushstrokes hid a killer's confession. But did she uncover a killer, or just a man with a fascination for the dark side of human nature, an artist who saw beauty in horror? Critics argue Cornwell's case is more passion than proof, built on circumstantial links and a desire to pin the crimes on a famous name. Yet Sickert's enigmatic presence pulls you in, his story a haunting blend of creativity and suspicion that refuses to be dismissed. Finally, there's Francis Tumblety, an American doctor with a checkered past and a documented hatred for women, a man who lived on the fringes of respectability, his life a tapestry of scandal and deceit. Tumblety was a charlatan, peddling fake cures across continents, from New York to London, his charm masking a volatile personality. He was in London during the murders, and he fled to the U.S. just as the police began to close in, raising suspicions that he was running from more than just his usual troubles. His medical knowledge fit the profile of a killer with surgical skills, and his collection of anatomical specimens, including, reportedly, human organs, sent chills down the spines of investigators. Police records show he was a serious suspect, his erratic behavior and misogynistic rants making him a compelling fit. But like every other suspect, the evidence is circumstantial, a mosaic of what-ifs rather than hard facts. Did Tumblety's flight prove his guilt, or was he simply a man who knew he'd be scapegoated in a city desperate for answers? Was he a transatlantic predator, slipping across borders to escape justice, or just another name in a long, frustrating list of dead ends? Each suspect seems to fit, yet none of them fully explain the mystery. They're like pieces of a puzzle that don't quite align, each offering a glimpse of the truth, but never the whole picture. Drut's suicide, Kosminski's madness, Albert Victor's privilege, Sickert's art, Tumblety's malice. Each tells a story, but none tells the whole story. Why is the truth so hard to pin down? Is it because the real killer was too ordinary to stand out, blending into Whitechapel's teeming crowds like a shadow in the fog, or too extraordinary to be exposed, protected by forces beyond the reach of justice, wealth, status, or royal blood? The suspects are as diverse as they are compelling, yet the mystery endures, a testament to the Ripper's ability to evade not just the police, but history itself. The enduring mystery of Jack the Ripper isn't just about a lack of answers. It's about why those answers have stayed out of reach for so long, tantalizingly close, yet maddeningly elusive, like a shadow that vanishes when you turn to face it. In 1888, criminal investigation was a fledgling science, stumbling in the dark without the tools we take for granted today. There were no fingerprints, no DNA, no databases to cross-reference suspects. Crime scenes were chaotic, often contaminated by curious onlookers, journalists, or even the police themselves, who trampled evidence in their rush to act. Bloodstains washed away, bodies moved, clues lost to the fog of incompetence or desperation. Witnesses were unreliable, their memories clouded by fear, darkness, or the haze of gin-soaked nights in Whitechapel's pubs. A woman claimed she saw a man with a shiny knife near Hanbury Street, but her story changed with every telling. A laborer swore he heard a scream near Mitre Square, but couldn't say what time it was. A child described a shadowy figure in a top hat, but was it real or a childish nightmare? These stories crumbled under scrutiny, leaving the police grasping at straws, their notebooks filled with contradictions. The police were overwhelmed, juggling public pressure, a flood of false confessions, and a city on the brink of hysteria, where every stranger was a suspect, every noise a threat. Every day brought new tips, new suspects, new dead ends, stretching their resources to the breaking point. Constables working double shifts, detectives sifting through hundreds of letters, informants peddling lies for a few coins. But there's more to it than that, far more. A deeper darkness that casts a long shadow over the case. Whitechapel in 1888 was a tinderbox of social and political tensions, a microcosm of a society fraying at the edges under the weight of inequality and fear. Anti-immigrant sentiment ran high, fueled by economic hardship and xenophobia, with Eastern European Jews and other foreigners bearing the brunt of suspicion. Blaming a figure like Kosminski, a Polish immigrant, was an easy way to deflect scrutiny from British society, to paint the Ripper as an outsider rather than a product of London's own failures, its neglect of the poor, its indifference to the slums, its hypocrisy in preaching morality while ignoring suffering. Class divides were stark, a chasm between the glittering West End, with its theaters and mansions, and the squalid East End, where families lived 10 to a room and starvation was a daily reality. The idea of a high-born killer, a royal like Prince Albert Victor, a doctor like Tumblety, an aristocrat slumming it for thrills, was explosive, a threat to the rigid social order that kept Victorian Britain intact, where the powerful were untouchable, their sins cloaked in privilege. Could the police have dared to pursue such a suspect, knowing the consequences could topple reputations, spark riots, or destabilize the monarchy itself? The Ripper case wasn't just a crime. It was a mirror held up to a society that didn't want to see its own flaws, its own complicity in creating a world where such horrors could flourish. Some case files were sealed for decades, their contents hidden from public view, while others were conveniently lost or burned in the years that followed, reduced to ash and speculation. Was this mere bureaucratic incompetence, the kind of sloppiness that plagued Scotland Yard at the time, with its outdated methods and overstretched officers? Or was it something more sinister, a deliberate effort to bury the truth, to protect someone whose exposure would shake the foundations of Victorian society to its core? The letters signed Jack the Ripper only deepened the mystery, their mocking tone adding another layer of torment to an already tormented city. The Dear Boss letter, dated September 25th, 1888, promised to clip the lattice ears off, and signed off with a name that would define the killer, a name that felt like a taunt, a challenge to catch him. The From Hell letter, arriving on October 16th with a piece of a human kidney, was even more chilling, its crude handwriting and gruesome contents suggesting a killer who reveled in his own infamy. Were these letters the voice of a monster, or the work of pranksters exploiting the chaos, seeking fame in the killer's shadow? No one could say for sure, but they kept the terror alive, making the Ripper seem omnipresent, untouchable, a specter who could strike at will, his laughter hidden in the fog. The more you dig, the more it feels like the truth was buried, not by accident, but by design. Was the Ripper allowed to vanish to preserve a fragile social order, to spare the powerful from scrutiny, to protect the illusion of a moral empire? Or was he simply a ghost, too clever to be caught, his true nature lost to the fog of time? Could the police have been deliberately misled, their efforts sabotaged by forces higher than they could challenge? Politicians, aristocrats, perhaps even the monarchy itself? The silence that followed the murders, as abrupt as their onset, is almost as chilling as the crimes themselves. A void where answers should be. A silence that screams of secrets kept. Today, we stand armed with tools our Victorian ancestors could only dream of: DNA analysis, geographic profiling, digital archives, artificial intelligence. Yet the Ripper case remains maddeningly elusive, a puzzle that refuses to be solved, a wound that won't heal, a mystery that continues to captivate and confound. In 2014, the world was abuzz with what seemed like a breakthrough. A DNA test on a shawl allegedly linked to Catherine et al.'s murder pointed to Aaron Kosminski, the Polish barber whose name had long lingered in police files as a suspect. The shawl, stained with blood and other traces, was said to carry Kosminski's genetic signature, a scientific triumph that promised to unmask the killer after 126 years of mystery. The media went wild, proclaiming, "Jack the Ripper identified," and the public leaned in, desperate for closure, hungry for a resolution to the most infamous cold case in history. But the truth is far murkier, a tangle of science, speculation, and uncertainty that refuses to yield a clear answer. The shawl's chain of custody is a mess. It was passed through countless hands, from policemen to collectors to auction houses, stored in attics, displayed in museums, handled by countless fingers over decades. DNA evidence from 19th century artifacts is notoriously unreliable, prone to degradation, cross-contamination, or misinterpretation. The testing process itself has been criticized, with questions about methodology and the risk of modern DNA contaminating the sample. Experts remain divided. Some champion the findings as a historic breakthrough, proof that Kosminski's blood runs through the case, while others dismiss them as wishful thinking, a case of science bending to the allure of a headline, a desperate attempt to close a case that resists closure. The debate rages on, a microcosm of the Ripper's enduring power to confound, to draw us and only to leave us empty-handed. Other modern approaches have tried to crack the case, each offering a glimmer of hope only to fall short of the truth. Geographic profiling, a technique that maps crime scenes to predict a killer's likely home base, suggests the Ripper lived in the heart of Whitechapel, perhaps on Flower and Dean Street, a notorious slum just steps from the murder sites. This points to a local, someone who knew the alleys like the back of his hand, slipping through the fog with ease, blending into the crowds of laborers, immigrants, and drifters who filled Whitechapel streets. But if he was so close, how did he evade capture? Even with vigilantes and police swarming the area, their lanterns piercing the darkness? Recent studies of the victim's wounds have shed new light on the killer's methods, suggesting a level of anatomical knowledge that narrows the field. Perhaps a doctor, a butcher, a mortuary worker, or a medical student with access to cadavers. The cuts were precise, the organ removals deliberate, suggesting a familiarity with the human body that went beyond mere chance. Yet even this clue raises more questions than it answers. Was the precision deliberate? A red herring meant to mislead investigators into chasing educated men rather than a common laborer? Or was it a byproduct of a twisted mind? A killer who learned his craft through practice, obsession, or even some macabre apprenticeship. Handwriting analysis of the Ripper letters has yielded no clear answers, with experts split on their authenticity. Some see the scrawl of a barely literate killer, others the flourish of a prankster's pen. Attempts to reconstruct the crime scenes using modern forensics, 3D modeling, blood spatter analysis, even virtual reality simulations have offered vivid glimpses into the killer's methods, the speed and confidence of his attacks, but no definitive suspect has emerged. Some researchers have scoured archives for overlooked clues, unearthing police reports, coroner's notes, and witness statements that paint a vivid picture of 1888 Whitechapel, a world of desperation, violence, and fear, but stop short of naming the killer. Others have turned to artificial intelligence, using algorithms to analyze patterns, cross-referencing suspects with historical records, mapping their movements against the murder timeline. But the results are inconclusive, a tangle of probabilities rather than proof. A reminder that even the most advanced technology cannot pierce the veil of history's secrets. Every new discovery seems to pull us closer to the truth, only to leave us grasping at shadows, lost in the same fog that cloaked the Ripper's crimes. Is the answer still out there, hidden in some overlooked archive, buried beneath Whitechapel's modern streets, or locked in a sealed file no one will ever see? Or has time sealed it away forever, leaving us with nothing but theories, speculation, and the ghosts of those 5 women whose lives and deaths continue to haunt us? So here we stand, over 130 years later, still haunted by the same questions that tormented Victorian London, still chasing a shadow that refuses to be caught, a killer who seems to exist beyond the reach of justice or reason. Who was Jack the Ripper? Was he a tormented soul like Montague Druitt, driven to madness and self-destruction by demons we'll never understand? His suicide final act of guilt or despair? The Thames washing away his secrets? A volatile recluse like Aaron Kosminski, lost in the fog of his own fractured mind, lashing out at a world he couldn't control, his asylum walls the only thing that stopped his rampage? A cunning predator like Francis Tumblety, slipping across borders to escape justice, laughing at the chaos he left behind, his hatred for women fueling a spree that knew no bounds? Or could the wildest theories hold a kernel of truth? Was the Ripper someone so powerful, so connected, that the truth had to be buried to protect the very pillars of society? A royal like Prince Albert Victor, shielded by the monarchy's iron grip, his crimes erased to preserve an empire's dignity, the honor of the crown placed above the lives of the poor? An artist like Walter Sickert, whose brilliance masked a darkness too subtle to prove, his paintings a coded confession hidden in plain sight, their meaning lost to all but the killer himself? The murders stopped as abruptly as they began, leaving behind a silence that's almost as chilling as the crimes themselves. No final confession, no definitive clue, just a void where answers should be, a silence that screams of secrets kept. What if the identity of Jack the Ripper isn't just unknown, but deliberately hidden? What if the answers are locked away in some dusty archive, guarded to protect names too big to fall, reputations too fragile to tarnish, an empire's stability too precious to risk? What if the Ripper was no phantom, but man, ordinary, unremarkable, his true horror lying in how easily he blended into the crowd, a nobody who outsmarted the world with a blade and a smirk? Or what if he was a somebody, a figure so untouchable that justice was never an option, his crimes swept away by the tides of power? The shadow of the Ripper lingers, a reminder that some mysteries refuse to die, no matter how much time passes, no matter how hard we search. His crimes were wound on history, one that still bleeds, still fascinates, still terrifies, a scar on the soul of a city and a world that cannot forget. The 5 women, Marian Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, Mary Jane Kelly, deserve more than to be footnotes in a killer story. They deserve justice, even if it's only the justice of memory, of keeping their names alive. So what do you think? Who was Jack the Ripper? And why has his identity stayed a secret for so long? Was he a monster born of Whitechapel's despair, a product of its poverty and pain, or a mastermind protected by forces we'll never know? A local who walked among his victims, unseen, unnoticed, or an outsider who vanished into the night, leaving only blood behind? Drop your theories in the comments below. I'm dying to hear what you think, and I'll be reading every single one to see if we can get closer to the truth, to shine a light into the darkness. The Ripper's story isn't over. It lives in us, in our questions, in our need to understand the darkness that lurks beneath the surface of humanity, the evil that wears a human face. If this journey into the dark heart of the Ripper case kept you on the edge of your seat, heart pounding, mind racing with questions, then smash that like button and hit subscribe for more true crime stories that grip you from the first second to the last, stories that pull you into the shadows and refuse to let go. We're diving into the world's most chilling mysteries every week. Serial killers, unsolved cases, conspiracies that make you question everything. And you don't want to miss what's coming next. Ring that bell so you're notified the moment we drop a new video, because the next one might just be the story that haunts you the most, the one that keeps you up at night. Craving more unsolved cases? Check out our deep dives on the Zodiac Killer, the Black Dahlia, and other haunting tales right here on the channel. Share this video with your fellow true crime fanatics. Spark a debate. Get your friends talking, because the mystery of Jack the Ripper belongs to all of us, a puzzle we can't help but try to solve. Let's keep the conversation going in the comments. Who do you think the Ripper was? What clue do you think holds the key? Is there a theory we haven't explored? A detail we've missed? Thanks for watching. Stay curious and stay safe. I'll see you in the next one, where we'll chase another shadow through the fog of history.